All right, listen up, gang. I came across something in the last few days that genuinely stopped me in my tracks. I wasn't even actively looking for it. I was just scrolling, reading, keeping up with what's being discussed when I stumbled onto a post in one of the David-related subreddits. And I'm not gonna lie to you, it's one of the most unsettling things I've seen connected to this case so far. Someone in that subreddit managed to pull a screenshot that appears to show a private note from David's phone. And according to the post, this wasn't hacked or leaked or stolen. This was actually visible in a documentary that David himself released over 2 years ago. That alone already raises eyebrows. But what really caught my attention was the content of that note. It reads like some kind of secret poem. And again, I want to be very clear here. I'm not saying we know exactly what this means or that it proves anything by itself. I'm not jumping to conclusions. But the poem is about blood. Specifically, storing blood, drinking blood, and performing rituals surrounded by blood. And yeah, I know how that sounds. That's exactly why I want to approach this carefully. This post has been circulating for a bit now, and it's been sitting in the back of my mind. I've wanted to dig into it properly, not just glance at it and move on. Because when you're covering a case like this, you can't ignore things just because they're uncomfortable. And honestly, this is creepy. There's no other way to put it. So let's slow this down and actually look at what's being discussed. I pulled up the screenshot myself and used a magnification tool so I could read as much of it as possible. At the top, it appears to say something along the lines of covered in blood. Below that, there's a line that refers to a fluid that keeps us alive. Then it becomes harder to read, but certain phrases stand out clearly. Some wish to store it, some wish to savor it, some drink it, some perform rituals surrounded by it. There's language about blood spreading through fields, not seen with the eyes but felt with the heart. There's a question about whether the earth itself is bleeding. Now again, I'm not saying this is a confession or evidence of anything specific, but in the context of everything else surrounding this case, it feels disturbing. And what makes it worse is, this isn't some random fan theory. This was allegedly visible in content David himself released publicly years ago. And that's where the pattern starts to feel uncomfortable. Because with this case, it feels like every single day more odd details surface. Old videos, old statements, artistic choices, symbolism, things that didn't mean much at the time, but now seem to line up a little too neatly with what we know happened later. I'm not saying this poem means he drained someone's blood or stored it or drank it. I want to be very clear about that. I'm not making that claim. But I do think it's reasonable to say that an obsession with blood, gore, and bodily fluids appears repeatedly in his past work and behavior. People in the comments started connecting this to other things that have already been discussed on this channel. For example, the white shirts with bloodstains that were sold as merch. At the time, some people brushed it off as shock aesthetics. Others asked uncomfortable questions. Was it real blood? Was it paint? Could authorities ever test something like that? I don't know, but if I were investigating this case, I'd want answers to those questions. I really would. One commenter broke things down further by focusing strictly on what they claimed were confirmed facts. According to them, the medical examiner reported Celeste's weight at around 70 pounds. Meanwhile, sheriff reports from her DA, hometown listed her at approximately 120 pounds in the missing person report. The LAPD also stated that her body was found intact. So the question they raised, again, not a conclusion, just a question, was whether a significant loss of body mass could indicate something unusual. They tied this to David's previous comments in another video, where he described a white rose as beautiful because it resembles a human drained of blood. And this is where symbolism becomes uncomfortable. White roses, white shirts, bloodstains, purity imagery, innocence. And yes, the victim in this case was a minor, a 14-year-old child. I don't care what anyone says, children are innocent, through and through. So when people start pointing out these visual and symbolic patterns, it's unsettling at the very least. Now, some commenters pushed back hard, and rightly so. One explained that decomposition alone can drastically reduce body weight. Fluids break down, tissue disintegrates. Over time, the body naturally becomes lighter. That explanation makes complete sense and should not be dismissed. Others argued back that the timeline itself remains unclear. Some said the body was in the car for weeks, not months, and questioned why certain details haven't been addressed publicly. Where was her phone? Why wasn't it found with the body or in the vehicle? Was it ever pinged? Was it active? Who was paying the bill? Were call logs retrieved? These are reasonable investigative questions, not accusations. Then things start getting more extreme, as they often do online. Some people suggested freezing, some suggested storage, some suggested ritualistic behavior, others accused mainstream media of covering things up. And at that point, you have to take a step back and separate grounded questions from speculation that spirals out of control. One user even admitted they removed their original post because they realized the poem might simply be about blood as a life-giving substance. That's possible. But here's the thing. Context matters. If someone with no disturbing background writes abstract poetry about blood, it hits differently than when someone with documented interests in gore and violent imagery does. And let's talk about that for a moment. We've heard allegations, particularly from Discord logs, that David was obsessed with gore, sending graphic images, watching disturbing content. And I want to say this clearly, sending unsolicited gore to anyone is a violation, full stop, just like sending unsolicited explicit images is a violation. It doesn't matter how desensitized someone thinks they are. A lot of us grew up in the early internet days when shock sites existed and people were tricked into seeing horrific things. That stuff messes with you. It's abusive. And if someone develops an obsession with that kind of content, it's not harmless. So when I look at this poem, combined with those allegations, combined with the reality that a 14-year-old's remains were found in this man's car, I think examining his psyche is fair, not to sensationalize, not to accuse, but to understand. Do I think David is a literal vampire performing occult blood rituals? No, I don't believe that. I'm not saying that. But do I think he may have leaned into dark, violent, cult-like imagery as an aesthetic? Yes, absolutely. And we've seen that in music, fashion, and celebrity culture before. Artists like Playboi Carti openly adopt vampire imagery. Does that mean they're drinking blood? No, but they understand that darkness, danger, and taboo attract attention. And sometimes that aesthetic draws in vulnerable, impressionable fans. The problem is, when that aesthetic crosses paths with real-world violence involving a minor, it stops being just an image. It becomes deeply disturbing. I also want to address the 764 cult discussions. A lot of you have been asking me to dig into it, and I will. Haven't fully researched it yet, so I'm not going to speak on it irresponsibly, but I've seen enough references to know it deserves a closer look. I'll be doing a dedicated video on that once I've done my homework. At the same time, I agree with those saying we need patience. Some theories are genuinely out of control. Not everything is ritualistic. Not everything is occult. Sometimes the truth is ugly, simple, and horrifying without being supernatural. What matters most is accountability and clarity. We need answers from law enforcement. We need timelines. We need facts. And despite criticism, I do think we should allow the LAPD time to do their job. This is a complex case, a sensitive case, a tragic case. I know it's frustrating. I know people want updates now, but investigations like this take time, and rushing to conclusions doesn't help the victim or her family. I will continue digging. I've already identified multiple new angles I want to explore over the next few days. There is more information out there that hasn't been properly examined yet, and that's what this channel is about, bringing new details to light responsibly. Thank you to everyone who's been watching, commenting, and sharing thoughtful perspectives. We're all trying to understand something that honestly shouldn't exist, a case this disturbing involving a child. And until we get clear answers, the least we can do is stay grounded, stay critical, and stay human. I'll keep you updated. I appreciate you trusting me as a source on this. I'll see you in the next video. I'm out, gang.